With the recent very public fallout between President Donald Trump and Elon Musk, it's important for all of us to remember that while Elon was in charge of the DOGE effort is not dependent on whether or not Elon is a part of it or not. Meaning that even as Elon is in the process of leaving his responsibilities in the administration, the overall DOGE project to reduce the size of the federal government will continue with his absence. And along that line, late last week, the U.S. Supreme Court handed two big victories to DOGE in two separate cases. And so today, let's go through the details of those cases right after I briefly set the stage for us with a bit of relevant information, and also right after you smash those like and subscribe buttons so that this video can reach ever more people via the YouTube algorithm. Now, back on January 20th, 2025, when President Trump was first inaugurated into the White House, well, he issued an executive order. You can see it up on your screen. It was Executive Order 14158. And that order, quote, established the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, with the goal of modernizing federal technology and software to maximize governmental efficiency and productivity. The executive order requires agency heads to establish DOGE teams within their agencies and to ensure DOGE has full and prompt access to all unclassified agency records, software systems, and IT systems in a manner consistent with applicable law. In practice, the way that DOGE operates is similar to the way an audit firm operates inside of corporate America. They go into federal agencies, they go through the systems, the contracts, the records, and anything else on file, and they're looking for things like discrepancies, inefficiencies, waste, fraud, abuse, things like that. Then they take all their findings and they give them to the head of that particular agency, and then that agency head can choose whether or not to act on those findings. Now, for the past 6 months, DOGE has met with many legal challenges. Many different groups and many different entities, they have filed lawsuits against DOGE for a variety of different reasons. Now, one of those lawsuits was called Social Security Administration versus the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. The gist of that case was that this union sued the Social Security Administration, arguing that they were illegally allowing these DOGE employees to come in there and access people's extremely sensitive personal data, including they were claiming things like Social Security numbers, bank records, medical records, things like that, all without having the proper safeguards in place. Their claim was that this action of theirs violated several different laws, including the Federal Privacy Act. Now, initially, the lower court ruled in favor of the union. Specifically, back in April of this year, a federal district judge over in Maryland, she issued a preliminary injunction which blocked the Social Security Administration from granting full access to DOGE of all these different files. In her own words, you had Judge Ellen Lipton Hollander say that allowing DOGE access to these Social Security records violated the Federal Privacy Act, and that also, quote, the DOGE team is essentially engaged in a fishing expedition at the Social Security Administration in search of a fraud epidemic based on little more than suspicion. Now, obviously, not giving DOGE access to the records that they were supposed to audit made the auditing process impossible. And as such, the Social Security Administration filed an appeal asking the appellate court to pause the injunction while the case played itself out in court. Their argument was that DOGE needed full access to this data right away in order to perform their executive mission. However, the appeals court also ruled against them. Specifically, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals voted 9-6 to keep the injunction in place. But the Social Security Administration appealed that decision again all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And after roughly a period of 2 months of waiting, last week, the Supreme Court ruled in their favor. And as a part of their ruling, the court wrote the following, quote, on April 17th, the district court preliminarily enjoined the Social Security Administration from granting DOGE affiliates access to various Social Security Administration records subject to certain exceptions. When considering whether to grant a stay, this court looks at 4 factors: whether the stay applicant has made a strong showing that he is likely to succeed on the merits, whether the applicant will be irreparably injured absent a stay, whether the issuance of the stay will substantially injure the other parties interested in the proceeding, and where the public interest lies. After review, we determine that the application of these factors in this case warrants granting the requested stay. We conclude that, under the present circumstances, the Social Security Administration may proceed to afford members of the Social Security Administration DOGE team access to the agency records in question in order for those members to do their work. meaning that the U.S. Supreme Court likely thinks that DOGE will succeed on the merits of their case, and therefore, while the case actually plays itself out in the lower courts, the DOGE employees embedded at the Social Security Administration will get access to the data in order to be able to continue the audit. And so that is the first victory. The second victory for DOGE came in the form of another lawsuit, a case that was called U.S. DOGE Service versus Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. In this case, you had a left-leaning watchdog group file a Freedom of Information Act request against DOGE, demanding that DOGE hand over their internal records, things like emails, memos, staff information, project plans, and so on. Their argument was that since DOGE was acting like a federal agency, it must therefore comply with government transparency laws like the Freedom of Information Act. Now, for your reference, the Freedom of Information Act, or otherwise as it's usually commonly referred to as FOIA, which is the acronym, it's a law from 1966 which allows individuals like you and me to, quote, obtain access to government information in executive branch agency records subject to certain exceptions. It's basically the law that requires the government to turn over their internal records if someone requests those records. However, as is noted on the FBI website, quote, FOIA applies to records created by federal agencies and does not cover records held by Congress, the courts, or state and local government agencies. And so along this very line, DOGE pushed back against this request, claiming that since they are just an advisory body, not a federal agency themselves, they're actually exempt from things like the Freedom of Information Act. Now, just as with the other case, the lower court actually ruled against DOGE, ordering them to preserve all their internal records, as well as to allow that left-wing watchdog group to perform discovery by both handing over documents as well as by allowing DOGE staff members to be deposed under oath. Now, DOGE appealed that decision, but again, just like the other case, the appellate court ruled against them as well. DOGE then appealed that decision again to the U.S. Supreme Court, and after 2 months, just like in the other case, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of DOGE. Specifically, the U.S. Supreme Court granted DOGE the relief that they were seeking, which is a pause on discovery. Basically, just like in the other case, the Supreme Court stopped the discovery process while the case itself continues to play out in the lower court. All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment, I'd like to introduce our sponsor and my own personal gold dealer, American Hartford Gold. Now, as soon as the latest round of tariffs hit, almost immediately, the stock market hit some serious waves, we could say. It became super turbulent, very volatile, and of course, these conditions don't just affect Wall Street. They affect all of us with our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I want to introduce a company that I trust and I use myself to help secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move their assets into something tangible, something you can actually hold, physical gold and physical silver. Two precious metals that help me sleep better at night, knowing that I have a hedge against all those brilliant decisions being made over in Washington. Now, they have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, they have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your doorstep, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive buy one, get one deal for my viewers. When you call them and mention my name, Roman, for every 1 ounce of gold that you purchase, you can get 1 ounce of free silver. And so take advantage of this special offer. Either call 866-242-2352 or simply text Roman to 65532. That's again, 866-242-2352 or text Roman to 65532. I'll also throw their information. It'll be down in the description box below. Basically, the case will still continue to be litigated. This decision from the U.S. Supreme Court just means that while it's being litigated, this watchdog group can't just use the discovery process to get all the files that they were looking for from the FOIA process, which basically actually follows the argument of the U.S. Solicitor General. He said that essentially, if this watchdog group is able to use the discovery process while litigating the case to figure out whether the Freedom of Information Act applies or not, well then, quote, the lawsuit turns FOIA on its head, effectively giving the watchdog group a win on the merits of its FOIA suit under the guise of figuring out whether FOIA even applies. And so there you have it. In a single day, the U.S. Supreme Court handed 2 significant victories to the DOGE, allowing them to not hand over their internal documents while at the same time gaining access to the internal documents of the Social Security Administration. If you'd like to read either one of these 2 unsigned rulings, I'll throw the links to both. You'll be able to find them down in the description box below, which again is that same description box below those like and subscribe buttons, which, If you haven't smashed already, I hope you take a moment to smash now so that this video can reach ever more people via the YouTube algorithm. And then, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free.